How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to This and That. I'm your host, Xander, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. You just rolled up on I can't believe that happened. I actually really love the way those guys did it. I think it's Toonie that has created some tracks for the podcast. So we really appreciate them. Actually, as soon as I can get some links to where you can get that song from, I've got to resize that because I've got that in a 1x1 format. And for me to stream here on your For You page, I'm going to need that in a 9x16. But that was pretty beast. No worries. It's going to look sweet tomorrow. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe. Also, join the membership if you have the opportunity to. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Twitch. TikTok is no longer allowed in America for right now, so sorry about that. If you guys want to jump onto the show, you can approve the mic, approve the camera. If you click that link in the comment section, it'll bring you straight up onto the show in real time. And we can talk about the conversation in real time. And there are some strong comments and topics that we can talk about on the side in addition to, because on this, that, and everything in between, we talk about this, that, and everything in between. So today we're supposed to be talking about the things that hold you back from being a successful landlord, the things that get in the way. So I know that there's a lot of talk about going into real estate, what you can do, what you should do, where you should go. But what nobody ever tells you about is what you should be doing to look out for some of the negative pitfalls that could hold you back. So I wanted to talk about that on the show today, uh, which is going to be very interesting for you guys. So allow me to dive deep into this obstacle. So this is going to be one of the biggest obstacles that we have in real estate, and see if we might be able to hold back on some of the things that could hinder our ability to be successful, and figure out ways for us to overcome these things. So becoming a successful landlord, it's a goal that many of us strive for. Not a lot of us that really think about it, think about being financially successful, think about striving for becoming a landlord. But those of us that want to be uh, free from manual labor, but also want to generate a stable income and while acquiring extra assets, are probably going to be leaning towards real estate and becoming a landlord. Because if you buy yourself a duplex, you can rent out half of it. If you buy yourself a fourplex, you can rent out 3 out of the 4 units and have the tenants share the cost of the property, and you turn a profit at the same time. And then all you have to do is just collect the rent from all your neighbors, which in most situations you get the most respect from your neighbors because you're the landlord. You can put them out because part of every lease is being a public nuisance. So if you piss off your landlord because of your behavior, that technically makes you a nuisance, which technically gets you chucked out at the end of the next billing cycle, terminating of a lease. So gives you a pretty good environment, but there are some things that people don't really think about as to what goes into being a landlord. So while it is a goal for some people, it is surprising as to how many of us hold ourselves back from achieving this goal. And we've all heard horror stories and the myths and the misconceptions about being a landlord, because a lot of us really talk about the slum landlords when we're renting properties from somebody else as opposed to renting properties to somebody. And we hear about the landlords that don't properly maintenance their properties, don't pay attention to the customer complaints, leave everything up to the customer, and then like the tenants really got to hold themselves down. We've also heard stories from individuals who tried to rent out a room or something like that to a friend or a person in need, and that person, who ironically is a high risk tenant, doesn't respect their property or doesn't pay the rent. And then you end up having to go through this long drawn out eviction process to put them out. Roommates that aren't reliable, and you knew they weren't reliable before they became a roommate, but now that you've become roommates, they end up not working out for you, and then you have to end up with some kind of litigation to separate ties from your roommate because they defaulted on the loan. Also, you have situations where you get evicted because they got evicted because you were on a lease too. Yeah, all of these things we're covering. But what if I told you that the biggest obstacle standing in your way might not be what you think it is? Landlords can make several costly mistakes that can lead to financial losses, legal issues, and tenant dissatisfaction. And Here's a summary of the common mistakes landlords should avoid. One of the first mistakes that we make, and I just finished talking about this, was inadequate tenant screening. I'm going to be honest with you. No matter how big your heart is, unless you are doing this with no expectations for a profit, you must recognize when a tenant is a high risk tenant that is not likely to pay the rent, because one of the biggest mistakes is failing to thoroughly screen potential tenants that can lead to the result in renting to individuals who may not pay rent on time or could damage the property and not pay any rent at all. And once you give them that possession of premises, you have to go through a long ruling process where now you have to pay money to put them out of the house and then staple that to their bill, where if they own nothing, they have nothing, you really can't take anything from them. You can only wrap up the fact that they get off of your land, but you lose out on all of the back rent that they didn't pay you, and you lose out on all of the cost of court to get them put out of the property. The other issue that you have is that you can't take, with these bad tenants, you can't take self-help techniques like locking them out of the house, or if they're in the basement, locking them in the basement, or turning off any of the utilities, or anything to that effect. Because if you have any type of verbal or nonverbal lease agreement with them, they have a legal right to be there. And that means that a lot of states that have squatters' rights, where once they've been granted permission or their possession on the premises was not revoked, after a period of time, you have to evict squatters. You have to evict people who are trespassing on your property, who've been trespassing for an extended period of time without your knowledge. You have to trespass them off of the property by going through the legal process of evicting them. And all of that stuff takes a lot of time. So you have to make sure that you have a plan of action, but your plan of action must be a tentative one, and it has to be a very thorough one. So one of the solutions that we have is that, you're supposed to be able to implement a comprehensive tenant screening process that includes credit checks, rental history, and background checks. And when you're doing credit checks and rental history, you can do a hard pull on the three major credit agencies, because they're not bureaus. There's only one credit bureau, but the three major credit agencies. And then you can also do a criminal background check, which shows what they've been to court for. Now, what they've been to court for doesn't just talk about how many times they've gone to jail and what they've gone to jail for. It also talks about when they've ever had civil litigation against them, where somebody sued them for something, whether it's a car insurance or lawsuits for possession of premises. That is a legal term for eviction. And then also you have bankruptcies, where lawsuits for non-payment of assets. All of these things lead to showing whether or not the tenant is trustworthy with payments. Now, the rental history is what notes do the landlords put on the tenant's public record about their rental status. Now, those notes that they put down typically lead you to be able to understand whether or not they're able to take good care of the property. Because if previous landlords say, oh, they destroyed the place, they left a bunch of crap all over the place, stuff like that, then you're in a situation where you're going to rent to this person. They might break your house and then leave and not pay the rent. You've got to think about an individual where you're like, oh man, you're homeless, I'll give you a place to stay. Some people don't have a place to live because they got evicted for non-payment of the rent. They didn't try to rectify it. And now they're trying to go rent somewhere else, and nobody wants to take a person who doesn't pay the bill. You're going to try to open up your doors to them and try to give them a hand. But then the problem with that scenario is that if they didn't pay the other guy, the likelihood, since they never paid off that debt, is that they're not going to pay you either. They get in, they might pay you the first month, they might pay you the first 2 or 3 months, and then all of a sudden you're back to this drawing board where for some reason they don't got it on time. You charge them interest, if they can't afford to pay the base rate, they're not going to be able to pay the inflated rate. So they'll give you stuff, they'll give you something. And then after a while, they're going to owe you more than what they're paying you. And you're going to get tired of it. And you're going to be going through the eviction process, putting them back out again. This is the reason why you should check the rental history. Never do business with friends, because if you do business with friends, they will either you're going to ruin your friendship for sake of business. If they're not going to work well with you, they're either going to ruin your friendship for the sake of business, where you're going to cut ties because this isn't financially successful for you, or you're going to be in a situation where you're going to take a massive loss out of loyalty to your friendship. In either situation, if you're not benefiting from your friend, I've told you guys beforehand, just don't do it. Don't do it. Now, another thing, not understanding legal responsibilities. Mistakes that landlords make is the ignorance of landlord-tenant laws and safety standards can lead to legal disputes and fines. So one of the requirements that you have to do is familiarize yourself with the local regulations and legal obligations related to property management and tenant rights. Now, that's going to mean that you guys got to know, like, how many lights has got to be on. And this is like, if you're not going to keep the place in tip top shape, you have to understand that you got to get out there and maintenance the yard. You got to maintenance the roof. You got to repaint walls. You got to be able to go and do inspections when the tenant is available, at their convenience, not necessarily yours. And then you've got to be able to make sure that everything stays up to code. Now, I can tell you that that's going to be a hard thing to do when it comes down to making sure that the things are up to code. But the tenants have certain rights. They have, in certain states like Florida, they have a right to air conditioning. If they don't have that, then you're going to have a problem. They have certain places like New York where there's a right to have, reasonable heating. So if the heating isn't working, you're up a creek without a paddle. If certain fixtures aren't working, you're going to be dealing with some problems. So if your goal is not to keep the place in tip-top condition, which also means that you need to figure out a way to get an inspection done, the more frequently you do an inspection, the more successful you can keep the place up to code. But tenants are not going to be okay with the landlord coming and walking through the house every month. They're going to be a little bit uncomfortable about that. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of landlords put the burden of maintenance on the tenant, where the tenant reports that maintenance is needed. And then once they report it, then the landlord goes over there and goes and sees what he can do about it. Now, some of the tenants that damage the property themselves, it's not normal wear and tear. Those tenants probably won't tell the landlord, and then they will they'll leave it like that until they get ready to move, and then you'll start seeing them spackle walls and repaint and everything like that on their way out the door to repair the damage of the unit before they leave, so that the landlord doesn't say, oh, hey, this was a problem. This is a problem because of X, Y, and Z. I'm like, shoot, take pictures when you walk through the door. So if stuff don't look right, my dude, hey, it would like that when I got here. Got a date stamp. One of the other things that we have that's a common mistake is that getting a poor maintenance company, because the neglecting property maintenance typically is a mistake when you're renting a property, because the tenant isn't always responsible for maintaining the yard and stuff like that. So if the grass doesn't get cut on a regular basis, even if it's in a contract for the renter to do those things, if the property owner isn't making sure that it's getting done, code enforcement will penalize the landowner, not the renter of the land, which that means that the landowner would then have to pay the cost, and that would sever the positive engagement between a tenant and a landlord, because they're not taking good care of the property, and now you've got to go take care of the property. Failing to keep up with regular maintenance can lead to property deterioration and unhappy tenants. So, if you're dealing with broken pipes, you're dealing with flooding under the house, you're dealing with, in Florida, they have the calcium buildup. It's not even really a calcium buildup. It's like a large quantity of clay that kind of just like clogs the drainage pipes in redeveloped neighborhoods. You got to get a snake and go down there and just like really snake out the pipes. And if you don't, you're spending $2,500 to $3,000 to get it snaked out when you could have just kept the cash in your pocket and done it yourself. When the snake, you can get it from like an Ace Hardware or a Home Depot or something like that for like $8 to $10. You're paying the plumber almost $3,000 to drive up with the pressure washer in the back of a minivan to flush out your drainage pipes from outside of your house to get the pipes flushed out for the city. It's crazy. I've done this before. I can tell you it sucks. Either scenario sucks. It sucks doing it yourself because you smell like feces and then you got to go take you a hot shower after you get the water to run clear. Or you're going to pay out of pocket a substantial quantity of money for somebody else to do the exact same thing. Nothing special. Once you see what they're doing, you can actually do it yourself. So solutions is to schedule regular maintenance checks, address issues promptly, and keep a record of all maintenance activities. So if you were to say, well, we're going to go down quarterly, it's in the lease. When they sign the lease, where they say, well, you're going to pay whoever comes to check the property. Now, I've said this plenty of times before last year when we were talking about real estate and renting out properties. You can hire now. Pluses and minuses with this recommendation, but just think about this. You can hire off-duty law enforcement officers, firemen, medics, EMTs, and say, hey, want some extra money? I give you $20 per unit to go collect the rent and do a maintenance check. If you do this with anybody with a badge, you're set. Why? Because they're going to get $20 per tenant that they collect the rent on. You're going to give them a list of addresses or a list of apartments if you got an apartment complex to go collect the rent on. If a off-duty police officer shows up knocking on somebody's door in uniform to collect the rent money, yeah, that's going to set the environment that the rent better not be late. Not to mention, like, the people who have to put their stuff out on the side of the road is already aware that so-and-so hasn't been paying his rent on time for a while. Law dictates that he gonna get thrown out. So we ain't even gonna be able to show him no mercy when we come to pack up the stuff because I ain't collected money from him in a hot minute. You know, there's a lot of spinning wheels there. But the other thing is that you reduce crime on your property because nobody that is performing unlawful activities is going to be okay with having a police officer get written authorization from the landowner to encroach upon their private dwelling to do an inspection of the house, where a police officer obtaining information related to a crime can arrest anybody during the inspection of the house, which means you're not going to have drugs lying around. You're not going to have anybody harboring any fugitives in the place. You're not going to have too many extra heads in the house. You're not going to have children in inappropriate scenarios in the house because, you know, somebody with a badge is showing up to come and collect the rent money. This is a plus. Now, the minus is that certain tenants that you might be able to get decent quantity of cash flow from because they're willing to pay the cost to be off the radar. You're not going to get those guys. But if you want your property to be in the best condition possible, you don't really want those guys. You want people that have no problem with sitting down, having a cup of coffee with one deputy while the other deputy searches the house. And then if they find something, a maintenance guy comes a couple days later and fixes the problem. That's what you really want, because that means that the value of your property is going to be maintained and you're still going to be receiving your payments on time. Because even if they pay late and you're getting the interest payments, it's still an inconvenience, because until you get the profits off of that property, you have to take the loss and take profits from somewhere else and redirect it to that property. Now, poor communication with tenants. This is going to be another mistake where ineffective communication can lead to misunderstandings and unresolved issues. Some of these mistakes is not properly notifying them of the oncoming inspection, not getting their knowledge and respect of the fact that this is going to happen. So if you don't put it in a lease where you detail it and say, hey, we're going to come on the 15th of every month to come and get the rent for the first. We're going to have a maintenance check on that day. You need to be home, blase squaze. They're going to say, oh, well, I can't be home. I got stuff to do. Well, if it's in the lease that I can invade the premises without your presence, you're opening Pandora's box with that one also, because I mean, you go in there and you start looking around, and then all of a sudden something comes up missing, and now you're going to be held responsible for it. So you got to be careful with that. But those tenants that evade inspection, you got to work something out with them, and that lack of communication is going to be a problem. You have those all expenses included apartments. Those are going to be good apartments to have for the tenant, but it's a problem for the landlord, because it has to be in the contract, and then the landlord has to remind the tenant also every month, when you exceed the average usage threshold, that the increase in the utility bills is going to be offset by your increase of the rent. So if I projected a certain quantity of usage, I include that in the rent, you pay me, and all of your utility bills are covered. That's included in the rent. You might actually save a little bit of money. Then after a while, I start seeing, oh, well, I'm getting a negative response from this particular unit because they're spending more money than I paid for on the utility bill, which means now I got to say, hey, you owe me X number of dollars for last month, and you owe me X number of dollars for this month also, and I got to add that into this month's rent. And the tenant's going to get mad. Oh, well, I didn't read that in the contract, or you didn't tell me, and they didn't read the contract, and they forgot what you said. So you have to be able to, as a solution, establish clear lines of communication and be responsive to the tenant's concerns. Then you want to be able to do regular check-ins, and this will help maintain a positive relationship where you double check and make sure that they understand that everything's copacetic. So something to the magnitude of a congratulations letter. Oh, congratulations, you're under the average utilities usage level, and as long as you stay below this level, then you don't have to worry about seeing an increase on the rent due to the increase of usage of utilities. Something like that. It's like a clear way to let the tenants know, hey, I don't have to charge you extra money. Now, they can't say they didn't know, because if you get a letter every month that says, if in the event that you exceed a certain quantity of usage, there will be additional increases on the rent, then they'll know. They can't say they don't know. One of the other issues that you're going to have as being a landlord with incorrect rent pricing. Now, this is only going to impact you. If you set the rent too high, this may deter potential tenants. And if you set the rent too low, it can reduce the profitability. So what's going to happen here is that because you set it too high, you might not be able to rent it out, or you might not be able to rent out as many. And if you set it too low, you'll fill the place up, but still not break even or turn a profit. So one of the solutions is for you to conduct the market research to determine appropriate rent prices based on a location, property size, and amenities. Now, I can tell you on average, most places rent the place out at around $1 per square foot. At least on the East Coast, that's how it works out. In some of the higher valued areas, they might charge more than that. But what I've seen in the South and what I've seen on the East Coast is that most properties, the rental properties, are priced somewhere around $1 per square foot or less. Now, if it's $1 per square foot and you're looking at a $2,800 or a 2,800 square foot house, which is probably a 4-bedroom house, you're looking at close to $3,000. If you're looking at like a 900 or 800 square foot apartment, you're looking at like $900 to $1,000. Now, the other thing you're going to see that's going to also be a difference to the standard is that when you see a 900 square foot or 1,100 square foot apartment, sometimes you see those going for somewhere between $1.25 per square foot and $1.75 per square foot, where that 900 to 1,000 square foot piece of property might still run you $1,500 to $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. It is what it is based on the values of inflation in high profile areas. Now, failing to create a solid lease agreement is going to be one of the biggest mistakes that you can do as a landlord, because not having a well-drafted lease agreement can lead to misunderstandings about rights and responsibilities. And this is also going to give you a more difficult time to hash things out in court, because while you can go to court and you can get reasonable compensation for things that are reasonably made clear, anything that is considered exceptionally speculatory, where you can only assume if you were the person doing it that this is the way it was supposed to go, if they can reasonably understand that the tenant is supposed to be getting it a certain way and the tenant's not getting it that way, you can reasonably expect the fact that the tenant going forward, once they've been notified of the correct information, is supposed to pay and receive benefits based on the new information. But everything under the false assumption is going to end up being exempt, which means you're not going to be able to get that money back, and you're not going to be able to win that in a courtroom. So you have to draft a comprehensive lease agreement that clearly outlines terms, conditions, policies, and consequences for violations. And that's going to be another thing that I was telling you, is that when you start talking about putting it into the lease agreement of pay increases on property taxes, or not property taxes, pay increases on the property's rent due to utility usage, because the utility usage is included in the cost of the rent, that there's a flat rate for utilities, and once it exceeds such and such rate, that those individuals would have to pay an increase, and you would be specific. Be specific. The light bill is gauged in kilowatt hours. So the average quantity of kilowatt hours for the certain quantity of power usage that you're projecting on a property, that is going to be the amount that they charge. If they're using less than that, that's good for you. Profit in your pocket. But if they start using more than that, then you could say if 600 kilowatt hours is what they're supposed to be using, and they use 1,200 kilowatt hours, you get a light bill for 600 kilowatt hours, the amount of money that went over. For those of you that don't know what that's like, when you think in some states, it's like 12, 13, 25 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you've utilized 600 kilowatt hours, you're looking at like $600. Well, $200-$300, something like that. I mean, if you start calculating pennies, you can work out the math, and you're like, oh, dip. Yeah, that's right. And then if they overshot that value by double, now they've got to pay the other half of the bill, because you already paid for half of it. Also, like I told you about giving them the notice about the inspections. If it's in the lease that there's going to be an inspection upon rent collection, then you can get you a monthly inspection, because they're going to come and get the rent and expect the unit when they come and get the rent. Which means you also have to be able to set you a time frame as to when you're going to do that inspection. If you're going to say that the rent is due between the 1st and the 15th, between the 1st and the 5th, the person will come and collect the rent between the 5th and the 10th. That gives you 10 days to pay the rent. If the rent in that person's hand when they come and collect the rent by the 10th, that they'll start getting that penalty between the 10th and the 15th, where up to, I do believe it was $150 at one point in time was the maximum that you could charge for late rent. But I mean, if you know this, somebody calls up and says, hey, I'm coming tomorrow. You're going to be there. Yeah, I'm going to be there. They come, they do the walkthrough. They pick up the rent check. They got to write down everything that's broken. And if they see something that they wasn't supposed to see, like fentanyl on the counter, then, other stuff happens. But if it's in a lease agreement that the rent is usually collected by assigned local law enforcement officers that'll come and knock on the door and come in and do an inspection on the property, you're going to see a cop walk up with a clipboard and some type of safety deposit bag or something, talking about something. I'm here to collect money. Like, where's my money? I know we get this experience every day on the side of the road in the average traffic stop, but I mean, it's just something that you got to think about when you're dealing with real estate. Now, another issue that you're going to see as a newly developing real estate company is inadequate record keeping, because I know that we are terrible with keeping track of stuff. We might have all the information that we want stored in our emails. It might be saved on our laptop. But if you look at the laptop itself, there is so much stuff on the laptop that you would have to search by name or search by serial number if you're not one to name your save files, so that you can find what you're looking for on your laptop. You don't have it, most people, at least if it's not an office computer, you don't have it in a save file. And sometimes you might need to have it in a save file that is in a save file, where you have a save file that is full of save files that are full of content from other scenarios, where you can organize your information and your data. But if you don't keep good records, you're going to have a problem, because poor record keeping can lead to financial management and difficulties. And during the tax season, it's going to be very, very crappy for you, because you're not going to be able to show proof of maintenance. You're not going to be able to show proof of specialist compensation. You're not going to be able to show proof for payrolls. You're not going to be able to keep track of when the tenant pays the rent on time versus when they don't. You're not going to be able to keep track of who owes what when. You're also going to have problems with keeping track with the maintenance and due dates for bills and other stuff like that. So you got to really keep track of the records that's going on with your rental property. One of the solutions is maintaining a detailed record of all transactions, communications with tenants, and property expenses, which is why a lot of companies these days are communicating with you by email instead of communicating with you by phone. You got some big business companies that will contact you by phone and then send you an email correspondence that restates what you guys talked about on the phone. That way, if there's any type of dispute or discussion or anything like that that needs to be handled in court, they can say, well, we talked about it on this day, and this day, because here's the email related to that. With that being said, I do want to talk about something on a side note. So before I go into the number 8 one, think about this. Have you ever been in a situation where somebody has called you or texted you or emailed you and they wanted you to answer a bunch of questions, go through a bunch of BS, and you're sitting there like, I don't like answering the phone for these kinds of things. You know that when you call anybody of importance, the first thing they tell you is that this call is monitored and recorded. Whether they say it is for quality and reassurance, for later playback, for your safety, whatever the case may be, they tell you that the call is monitored or recorded. Now, notice when a bill collector calls you, try this now. When a bill collector calls you and you answer the phone and they identify themselves as a bill collector, the first thing you tell them, even if you're not doing it, the first thing you tell them, I just want to make sure that you understand that this call is being recorded. Please restate your name for the record. They will hang up. They will not continue communication. They will not try to work through the scenario. Only time somebody's going to stick with it is if you owe them money or if it's a lawyer. Not too many people, they don't feel comfortable with being recorded. And, I understand that you have some two-party record states where the wiretapping law only prohibits you from recording conversations without the knowledge of the other person, without the knowledge and consent of the other person. So if they called you, as soon as you get on the phone, if you told them the communication was being recorded, they then have the choice to hang up the phone or continue communicating with you. Funny thing is, if they decide to stay on the phone, they're willfully allowing themselves to be recorded, because you said in order to participate in this phone call, you must consent to being recorded, because if you don't want to be recorded, you have to hang up the phone. The same way, I would tell you that if you wanted to be on this podcast, that you could be on the podcast, but you already know that the podcast is going to play back everything that you say at a later date and time. So if you don't want to be one of the highlight reels for the next 6 months, then you probably want to get in there and uh, turn off your camera after you've been verified as an adult, or dress appropriately before you get up on the podcast, so that you're not in a situation where you regret the fact that you jumped in to the podcast. Don't say anything that you don't want to be embarrassed about later on, because if you say something on a live stream that's going to be played back on a highlight reel multiple times, you just got to know that it's going to happen. I'm gonna be honest. There's been plenty of people that's come up on this podcast, and I've made that person specifically a highlight reel. The stuff that they said, whether it was smart or idiotic, I made them highlight reels. There is nobody safe when you come up on the podcast. As long as you're over the age of 18, you are on this podcast. When you get up on this podcast, I guarantee you, whatever you say or do on this podcast will be repeated multiple times for the next couple months. So whatever you need, whatever you do, you better be appropriate. One of the reasons why I encourage you guys not to get on here with inappropriate behavior, because that's just not going to be beneficial for you. Now, there's another thing when it comes down to if you can record the calls, because you actually can pay for third-party recording services, especially if you got commercial account. I would recommend, if you have a business, that all of your utility bills are registered to your business, because whenever the bills go south, that really just negatively impacts that business status. And if you have multiple businesses, you can have one business that is just a shell company that's like really taking the heat for all of the utility bills, and a whole nother business that has all of your assets, so that when one gets liquidated, the other one's not affected. But neither situation is your personal credit negatively impacted by that. That's like the only thing there. Beyond that is it. That is literally it. So from that point, you don't have another situation where I forgot my train of thought there, because I was just thinking about something on a side note. We were talking about recording people on the lines. If you were to establish the ability to record the calls. Oh, I was talking about the third-party line. So I was talking about the businesses where, if you got everything lined up with your businesses, if in the event that the situation happened where you had to liquidate a bunch of services, you yourself personally could establish positive services under your own name and not have to deal with the fact that you've had negative experiences in the past. Likewise, I've had this experience. If you have commercial insurance with companies, first of all, don't have a transportation business on your car insurance, because the insurance is going to be high as hell. But if you have a regular insurance policy under a commercial name, where you're paying regular insurance prices under a commercial name, the insurance is going to be way cheaper than what it would be if you did it for yourself. Then the fact is that the only driver's licenses that'll be on the policy will be the active drivers, which is probably be just yourself, maybe one or two other people that you're going to allow to utilize your vehicles. Or if you're doing a package deal with you and a few friends, you can register everybody's cars under the business car insurance and register every driver under the policy, and then break up the policy by vehicle, and then also break up the remainder of the policy by driver, where each driver pays a third if you got 3 cars, plus the value of their car, which means that you would have like a corporate situation. You could do the same thing with a family plan. Like, I know that some people get a family plan. You get a business plan, and you can get multiple lines on the same plan, and then some of the lines will be free lines. You can actually just say, well, since each one of these is taking a chunk, If you give me $40 and you give me $40 and you give me $40 and you give me $40, 2 or 3 of those people are free. But the fact is that each person that's got a line will give you $40 towards your bill, where it would ultimately pay down probably 60% of your bill, which would leave you with the difference. So instead of you paying $400, $500, $700, $800 a month for all of these lines on your plan, you would end up paying only like $30, $40, $50 a month for like 12 phone lines because you got 12 people on your line. Now, here's another thing that I think is really amazing about having everything registered to the business. And you guys are going to love this if you pay attention to it. Check this out. Real talk. If you have a commercial phone line and you have multiple users on that commercial line, in order for somebody to be able to get a warrant to wiretap your commercial phone lines, first they have to confirm which line is yours. Then they have to be able to wiretap that particular line. But in order for them to do that, they would have to first prove that the business entity is involved in criminal activity. So you yourself, they could wiretap your house. They get a warrant. But you yourself, if you're involved in criminal activity and that criminal activity is not involved in your business, where your business is not implicated in the investigation, they're going to have a harder time wiretapping a company phone to track you when they can't confirm which phone is yours. And they can't wiretap the whole company because they don't know which the whole company's not involved in the investigation, just the one individual. So it's going to... It kind of gives you a little bit of it's not going to stop them from doing it, but it definitely will hold them down a little bit as far as like making it difficult. And then if you're the kind of person that has a revolving door of individuals that are jumping on your line, you could switch numbers every now and again. Because it ain't that hard. You can literally go to your phone company and ask them for a new number. If you got 10, 15, 20 phone lines, you can always say, hey, I need to change one of the phone numbers on my line. They were trying to wiretap one line and then you change the number on it and they wiretap in the wrong line because that line is disconnected. They're never going to be able to keep track of you like talking about it. Eventually they'll catch up to you, probably by wiretapping your car, your house, and everything like that. But just like what I'm saying is that the fact is that when stuff is owned by stuff that's not you, they can't take legal action against that stuff to get to you. So keep that in mind when you think about not only how much money you can save your squad by everybody getting on the same thing and everybody paying one another if you could trust them to stay loyal to the game, but also think about how much you can build up on yourself and your business if you're able to put all this stuff together and put it up there where, you know, everybody is benefiting from the resources. Now, there was one more thing that I wanted to tell you. If you can record the calls, you always should. You always should. Whether you put the phone on speakerphone and then record the calls using a body camera, a camcorder, something with an SD card on it so you can store the conversation, because you really just need the audio file. You don't need the visual file. You can use a video recorder that will give you video and audio of the call, and you could just put the phone right up against the recorder where the recorder can get all of the communication. And then you can take that video file, put it into a video editor, and then cut out the video and keep the sound, and then save it like that. Or if you can't cut out the sound, then or keep the sound and cut out the video, because there are some platforms that can do it and some that can't, then you have the whole video conversation where you save that and compress the file. And if in the event that legal action needs to occur because of this particular type of conversation, you have evidence of that conversation. But typically when somebody calls you and you tell them that the line is monitored or recorded for quality and assurance, they're going to be terrified of that. And they're going to want to like back out of the situation and be like, no, You can't record me. It's illegal. No, actually, it's not. It's illegal for me to record you without your knowledge, but it is not illegal for me to record you. It is only illegal for me to record you without your knowledge. So if you know that I am recording this call when you called me, your choice is to stay on the phone or get off the phone. But if you stay on the phone, you're staying on the phone with knowledge that the phone will be recorded. So you are willfully complying with the recording and agreeing to the recording because you're going to insist on communicating with me with knowledge that the line is being recorded. So you just got to think about that. You got to think about that, because they can't say, oh, no, 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 you're going to get in trouble if you record me. I don't give you permission to record me. You're still on the call. As long as you're on the call, I told you in advance that the call is recorded. So as long as you stay on the call, you're being recorded. So as long as you know, it is your choice to allow yourself to be recorded by staying on the call, or it is your choice to get off the call because you don't want to be recorded. And I guarantee you, when you use this information against bill collectors, those call centers, those little Joe Schmoes that come up there and intimidate you and threaten you and everything like that, if you answer the phone and you tell them that the call is being recorded, bro, most of the people who call you are not going to call you no more. Those telemarketers that's trying to sell you stuff, they'll call you up and they'll try to sell you stuff. And you're like, oh, yeah, this call is being recorded. What was your name again? I guarantee you they're going to... Because the script that they read is to introduce themselves, give you their real name, and then try to convince you to give them money. If you answer the phone with this call is being recorded, please state your name for the record. Shoo. Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes you're going to hear a click. Sometimes you go, oh, I'm sorry, wrong number. Sometimes you're going to say, oh, no, you can't record me. Huh? Hey, if you're going to talk to me today, sir, you're going to be recorded. And I guarantee you they're going to hang up right after that. They will never get to why they called you. They'll never get to why they called you. Which also, when it comes down to those people that are spamming you, there's some laws out there that protect you from getting those harassing calls from those call centers. And if you keep track of those harassing calls, then you're able to prove that they're giving you those harassing calls, because you'll have more than one recording of that company or entity giving you that same harassing call and the frequency in which they give you those harassing calls, which allows for you to take legal action against that company. So that's another reason why it's a good idea for you to stand on your non-negotiable expectations for behavior and record those calls and tell those folks, hey, if you're going to talk to me, you just got to know you're being recorded. We're already doing it for traffic stops, so you might as well go ahead and do it for do it for phone calls too. So we were talking about some of the pitfalls about starting up wrong in real estate, being a landlord. So let's go back to that. Not having a contingency plan is going to be a big fallback that people aren't going to have when they're not prepared. So the mistake is failing to prepare for unexpected events. I giving you all these scenarios that like these things really happen, and if you took these steps, you'd be covered. But when these things happen, if you didn't take the proper steps, you're not covered. For example, you get a product from a phone company. You're responsible for the cost of the product. They tell you it's free, but once the service is suspended from the product, you owe them the product, or you owe them the value of the product. If you send them the product and then they don't get the product, they're going to try to bill you for the product. So if you don't keep the tracking number for the product, they're going to tell you that that product didn't get shipped or whatever, because you can't prove that the product got shipped. You're like, hold on, buddy. I got a tracking number. And the tracking number means that you can track where the product is, which means that the product got sent to you. If it gets lost in transit, it's not on me. But if you don't keep track of that tracking number, you could put yourself in a world of hurt, because they will be not finding the product. You will not have the product, but they will bill you because they don't have the product. So by default, you should have the product, even if you don't. You have to really pitch a fit about the fact that they're billing you for something that you don't have, and try to talk to upper management to get the upper management to remove that cost off of your account. But the fact is that when you have sent them product back, you've got to have proof. Usually, you've got to have like the tracking number, picture of the box. If you brought it to UPS, which UPS you brought it to, which day of the week you shipped it off at, because when you're fighting them over the bill, when they add $300, $400, $500 to your bill because you didn't return a product that you actually sent back, you're going to have to really prove that you did it. So likewise in real estate, when you're doing rental properties, you have to have ledgers to show that the tenant paid the rent, which also means you have to have documentation that gives notice when the tenant doesn't pay the rent. So each time the tenant doesn't pay the rent, you can't just tell the tenant, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. Nah, fuck that shit. You have to send them a written document that says the rent was due on such and such day by such and such day at such and such time. The rent is past due. You now owe X number of dollars. And you have to make a copy of it, give it to them. And you got to keep doing that until you decide to say, you know what? I got to put these people out. I've given them X number of notices about the rent payment. It has continuously increased in value because they are not paying on the rent, or they're not paying on the rent on time. And now I have to take civil action that warrants getting them removed from the property. The paper trail helps you out. Another issue that a lot of people don't pay attention to, because we always believe that if you get a rental property, it's always going to be full. That's not the case. You're going to, just like having a tenant that doesn't pay the rent or a tenant that doesn't pay the rent on time, there are possibilities where there is no tenant in the unit, and you have to take a financial loss for those particular units. If you have a whole house, single family house, and nobody's living there right now, you've got to pay for the utilities for that house. You've got to pay for the maintenance on that house, and you're not drawing an income off of that property. That's something that you've got to take care of. So vacancies is an issue. Repairs is another issue. Standard issue repairs. You should be smart about your money and take a certain chunk of the money that you get from your tenants every month and put it into an investment platform where you can get dividends off of that money every month, so that if in the event something needs to get paid, you can take some of the money off of the dividends from the stock and put that towards the repair. But you have minor repairs like changing out a faucet, changing out a handle, changing out a door. You have moderate repairs like replacing a door if it's a steel door, or replacing a window, a guardrail or something like that. Electrician requirements, or you have major repairs like holes in the walls, holes in the roof, holes in the garage, stuff like that, where the repairs start to be costly. You have to be able to budget enough money out of the profits you get from the tenant to say that after I pay for the mortgage and the property insurance, I'm going to put this extra money away for investment towards the property, so that if the tenant needs something, I could take that money and put it towards that. You want to create so the solution for that is going to be creating a contingency plan that includes a financial cushion for unexpected costs and considered insurance options. Another failure that landlords do, especially when you really like the person, or you're trying to cater to a friend, is delaying the eviction proceedings. This is a huge mistake, because not starting eviction processes promptly can prolong financial losses from non-paying tenants. So when they tell you that they don't got it and you say, oh, take as much time as you need, that statement there allows them to go from owing you money this month to owing you money this month from September. And the longer that they stay there, the longer they're owing you money, but they're not actually making extra payments to make it right. They're just going to say, oh, I don't got it. You know how it is. Times is hard right now. Yeah, well, as hard as these times are, it's going to be even harder on that sidewalk, because our sidewalk don't have no pillows. I'm trying to told you. So a solution, you got to be aware of your rights as a landlord and initiate eviction proceedings as soon as legally permissible, if necessary, which also means you can't evict the tenant without not advance notice. Most cities and states in this country, in the United States, look for anywhere between a 2-week eviction notice for a week-to-week person, 30-day notice for a month-to-month person, and a 90-day notice for anybody that's more than a year. You got to give them written notice. You got to give them a termination of contract. You've got to give them a written letter refusing to renew the lease, because the lease is either considered automatically renewable or automatically switched over to a month-to-month basis, where you have to send them a written document terminating the engagement, where you would dictate, if they're on a month-to-month lease, you would send them a lease and say, hey, send them a letter and say, hey, in 2-3 months, you know, we are terminating the relationship between us, the business relationship between us, where uh, we would no longer accept payment for your residency. But again, you're looking at a situation where if they don't move, you got to evict them, which could take 2 weeks from the day that you file it to get a judge to look at the case, and then another 2 weeks for the judge to execute the putting you off the property, and then another 6 to 9 months of litigation where they could be fighting for the right to stay on the property anyway. And if they can find a way to get a lawyer, they might even be able to stay on a property for that 6 to 9 months, not give you money for the rent, and still battle for the possession. So the quicker you can get them off the property, the better it is for you. Now, ignoring tenants violations is going to be another thing. When you this is a huge mistake, because allowing tenants to violate lease terms without consequences can lead to further issues. If they're not maintaining the property the way they're contractually required to maintenance the property, like keeping grass cut, not parking vehicles on the grass, stuff to that effect, you can start ending up with damaged properties or fines from the city, broken fences, broken appliances, broken stuff inside of the house. And these are things that you have to make sure that you keep at a minimum. The solution for this is enforce the lease agreement consistently and address violations promptly to maintain order and respect for the rules. If you have a multifamily environment and one person does not do what they're supposed to do, as soon as they don't do that, you're supposed to fine them. If you have assigned parking and they park outside of the assigned parking, you fine them or tow them. If they're not paying the rent on time, you fine them. If they're behind, you put up an eviction notice. Like, as soon as it's going down, you want to go ahead and hit them with it, because if you don't, the longer it takes for you to get that started, the longer it takes for you to get any other procedure started. Also, if you have multiple families, everybody talk on the property. So if one person doesn't do it and they're not fined for it, too many people start doing it, now you want to get mad and say, hey, everybody's doing it, gonna get fined. They're going to say, well, you wasn't finding anybody when person number 1 was doing it. So when the last 10 people started doing it, now you got 11 people doing it. Now you want to complain about it, but I shouldn't be held responsible for not doing something that somebody else on your property didn't do. Even though each lease agreement is individualistic, the fact is that somebody's going to try to say favoritism somewhere. So you just got to really make sure that you maintain those rules and get yourself a little bit of respect for enforcing those rules. Now, by avoiding these common mistakes, landlords can improve their management practices, enhance tenant satisfaction, and protect their investments effectively. When it comes to being successful, when it comes to being a successful landlord, many of us face a multitude of challenges that can feel overwhelming. And one of the biggest hurdles is lack of knowledge, not knowing where to start or how to navigate the complexities of the rental market. Without the right guidance, it's easy to feel lost and uncertain. You should usually try this with one rental person at a time. Hopefully you get you a good rental person, which allows you to build up a good rapport with that person, and then you can expand on multiple properties after the first person dives in. But it's easy to feel lost and uncertain when you're not knowing how you're supposed to move forward. Another major challenge is fear of failure, fear of the unknown, or fear of taking on too much risk. And one thing I forgot to put on this list was the fear of success, because if you have a successful real estate business, you now have the fear that you've got to maintenance this seemingly on your own. And if one wheel falls apart on the system, the whole system falls apart. You want to make sure that you have all of your priorities in a row. This fear can be paralyzing, causing us to put our dreams of becoming a landlord on the back burner. And then there are the financial concerns, the worry about having enough capital, or the uncertainty about how to manage cash flow. These certainties can be daunting, and it's easy to get stuck in a cycle of indecision. Lastly, I want to tell you, there's an issue of mindset. Having a mindset that's geared towards success, but struggling to overcome negative self-talk, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome. Meaning that you personally believe that you're a fake, that you're not the real deal Holyfield, and that you don't believe that you stack up to the expectations of your own personal expectations and your own personal myths and beliefs. Aspiring landlords often find themselves questioning their ability to succeed, and this can be a major roadblock on the path to achieving their goals. One of the main reasons lack of knowledge is such a significant obstacle is that the world of real estate is constantly changing, continuously changing. New laws and regulations are being implemented all the time, and it's hard to keep up. Without the right guidance, it's easy to feel like you're drowning in a sea of paperwork and legal jargon, which is why you're supposed to have legal lawyers on deck or pay property managers to manage the property for you, and then go and check on those properties while the property managers are making sure that the properties are okay. According to a recent survey, over 70% of aspiring landlords feel like they lack the knowledge they need to succeed. And that's a staggering number. And it's clear that this is an area where many of us need support. Fear of failure is another major challenge that holds people back from becoming successful landlords, as I mentioned before. And the truth is that the fear of failure is an inevitable part of the learning process. Every successful landlord in every successful area of performance has experienced setbacks and failures along the way, but it is how we respond to those failures that matter rather than letting fear hold us back. We need to learn to refrain our mindset and see failure as an opportunity to learn and grow. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take our losses and turn them into victories by, instead of saying, well, I failed, so I suck. No, you learn something from your failure. You actually learn more from failure than what you do from succeeding. You don't change your methods or your strategies based on the number of wins you've had. You change your methods and strategies based on the number of losses you have. So if you lose more than you win, eventually you're going to be great because you're going to learn way more than the average individual that never makes a mistake until they make a mistake. So financial concerns being one of those very common obstacles that aspiring landlords face. The reality is being a landlord requires a significant upfront investment, and it can be intimidating to take that leap. However, with the right mindset and the right strategy, it's possible to mitigate risk and create a lucrative business. The key is to focus on cash flow and long-term wealth, creating rather than getting bogged down with a short-term financial concern. You want to make sure that you are focusing on the long term. As I was talking to somebody earlier today, if you're taking out a 40-year loan instead of taking out a 15 or 30-year loan, your monthly payments are going to be lower. The interest rates are going to be higher because they're going to get more money, but the percentage of interest you're paying on a month-to-month basis is still going to be lower. Either way, you're saving money on the monthly payments where you could still overpay on the principal, but you don't have to worry about that versus complaining about the fact that you're taking out such a large quantity of money in a short period of time. When it comes to overcoming these obstacles, the key is to shift our mindset and focus on what we can control rather than getting caught up in fear and self-doubt. We need to focus on taking action, seeking out knowledge and guidance, and building support networks. By doing so, we will overcome the common challenges that hold us back and achieve the success we've always dreamed of. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? Because a successful landlord requires us to confront our fears, overcome our lack of knowledge, and shift our mindset. It is not easy, but it is possible. By recognizing the obstacles that stand in our way and taking deliberate action to overcome them, we can achieve our goals and create the financial freedom we've always dreamed of. If you're willing to share any of your experiences with real estate, or if you have some questions and comments about what would be holding you back from becoming a successful landlord, or if you want to invest in landlord related properties and you need some information about that, make sure that you comment about that below. You can also go to the community tab of the platform and leave comments in the community section that we respond to. And don't forget to check out the videos that we have coming in the future related to landlords. And definitely make sure that you grab the family and friends and come here and sit on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter through the majority of the quantity of lives that we have. But just remember, we are live 9 Eastern, 7. Oh no, it's later now. It's later now. Look, we kicked off today at 11 Eastern, 10 Central, 5 what was that? Like 7 or 8 Pacific. But now we're looking at potentially trying to tee things off once we finish with because we had a problem with the internet, 2.5 hours on the phone, and finally got everything up and running. It was able to start an hour late, but we typically should run about 9 Central, which is 10 Eastern time, and that'll be a good look for us going forward. Just remember, we are on daily. So you will see us at some point during the day or during the night, but we are on daily. With that being said, I want to make sure that you guys like and subscribe. Again, ladies, as long as the situation doesn't make sense, I'm going to keep asking y'all to make it make sense. So, lady, please make it make sense. And then, fellas, I really appreciate you guys coming to the show. A special shout out to what was it, Reese yesterday, Reese Martinez, and then Max the loser. Special shout out to those guys. Omni81, Red Void. Special shout out to you guys on Twitch side. I just really appreciate everybody who comes to the podcast and hangs out for a while and listens to some intellectual knowledge about stuff that we really are impacted by today and what we can do to navigate through them. If you're just getting in at the back end of the show is going to be up for a replay. If you just click on the channel and take you straight to the live, and then you can go in there and just grab on the show. So I strongly recommend that you get it from the beginning, because there's always knowledge in each one of our podcasts that you can benefit from, even if you don't put in much effort down the line. So as we go to make ourselves a higher, better man, I just want to tell you guys, hey, thank you for coming to This and That, where I'm your host, Sander, and we talk about this, that, and everything in between. And I'm going to see you guys.